Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the XY Spark podcast. Let me say that again. Welcome to the XY Spark podcast. It is a Tuesday. We're talking under the theme today, Take Back Tuesday. This is your boy, your men's life coach, Rolando, and you're here on the podcast for men. This is a podcast where we seek to normalize conversations about men's mental health. We know that men's mental health is not a myth, and we are here every weekday morning from 5:30 to 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And wherever you are located around the planet, we want to invite you to join in the conversation. Right now, we are live on TikTok, YouTube, and the Podbean app. So if you want to join our conversation live, you can join us on the Podbean app and you'll find it at xyspark.podbean.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at xyspark. We are so excited to be here one more day, and we want to just send out a huge appreciation to all those who have joined us live on our TikTok every single day. We do have some faithful followers. We do have some special people who join us here on the podcast morning after morning. We just wanted to let you guys also, be aware that we do offer live coaching calls right here in the podcast. So if you are out there and the topic that we're speaking about this morning is resonating with you and you'd like to join our conversation, please do so. Please, guys, continue to keep those likes, those comments. Please invite a friend, tell someone to come on into the space, and let's keep the conversations going about the podcast. Why? Because, guys, I want to tell you this podcast is a podcast for you, it's a podcast for me. As men, we want to seek to normalize conversations about our mental health. Why? Because mental health is not a myth. And no man on the planet, irrespective of your race, class, ethnicity, or social orientation, no man on the planet is immune to being impacted negatively as it relates to his mental health. So come on into the space, join in the conversation, and let's chat a little bit. All right. So today it's a Tuesday, and today we are going to be speaking about the topic cultural norms and expectations, finding your way. Cultural norms and expectations. And guys, every single one of us, we are raised in certain environments. All right, all of us, whether by default, whether by choice or not, we were all raised in a certain environment. Right, culturally, most of us, every single one of us, were raised up in an environment that influences and impacts the way we live. It affects our belief system, it impacts our worldview, it impacts the way we conduct ourselves in relationships. And so we want to talk about those cultural norms that has been one of the main influences in the way we live our lives. So listen, guys, I want you to fasten your seatbelts today because we're going in for a tough conversation. And one of the things that I've learned over the time is having tough conversations are not the easiest thing. It's hard. All right. So I want to encourage you to stay with us. Right. Listen, viewers, I want you to share this live and invite more of your friends to join because something good is happening here in this space. All right. Already this week, we have had some really bold men who have decided to join in the live conversations, and we chatted about some really powerful things. So want to send a shout out to all those men who have joined in the live and who have been open and brave enough to talk about their mental health. Yes, guys, and that's what we're here to do. Come on into the space and let's talk about mental health, because mental health, it's not a myth, it's a real thing. So today we're talking about cultural norms and, expectations and finding our way. Now, I'm not sure where you were born. I'm not sure who influenced you. For me personally, I was born and raised in Jamaica. All right. I was born and raised in Jamaica. So definitely there were some cultural norms there that became a part of me. All right. So I'm going to talk about some cultural norms based on my own experience. And if you want to share some cultural norms based on your experience, you can type it in the chat. You can join us live on YouTube. You can join us, on those who are here on TikTok. Just type in the chat what were some of your cultural norms. Because for me, there were definitely some cultural norms that became a part of who I am. Now, one of the things that was very, very prevalent culturally is knowing that there are certain things that as a man I should not do, because doing that is going to make me look weaker than every other man in the community, right? So some of the cultural norms that I've had to process and work through is understanding that aggression is not the only way for me to solve problems. That was culturally acceptable in the community where I was raised, right? I needed to be aggressive. I needed to be loud. I needed to be rough. I need to prove to my friends, I needed to show them that in order to be acceptable, I have to demonstrate to them how good I am at drinking. All right. Another thing that was the cultural norm for me where I was raised is having one committed relationship. No. I remember when I was a young man and I started dating, and I had other friends, and there were friends who literally laughed at me and related to me that, hey, you have only one woman. What's wrong with you, man? You're not cutting it, right? And so right there and then, as a young man, I started to look through that lens of, okay, in order to prove to my friends that I'm a real man, I need to step up my game a little bit. So it was totally normalized for men to not be in committed relationships but have several ongoing relationships. All right. So that was one of the cultural norms that as a young man growing up, I've had to learn now how to confront that belief system and understand what true genuine relationships look like. I've had to work on myself to learn about what true commitment looks like. What are some of the cultural norms that you've had to work through? Hey, Rez, good to see you. I see Rez joining in here on the podcast. Great to have you. Seeing you here. Rez is one of our, I call him one of my biggest fans. Good to have you in the space, Rez. Hope you're doing well and your week is going great. So we're talking about cultural norms this morning, and so for me, that was one of the cultural norms, quote unquote, that I've had to process and seek now to go on that journey of self learning and self growth. What are some of the cultural norms that you have had to, how do I say it, explore as it relates to finding yourself and growing? So that was another cultural norms that I've had to. Another cultural norm that I've had to work through as a young man as I was coming up is um, understanding the reality that I don't need to be using as much drugs and alcohol if to be a man, right? So in my circle of friends back then, there was a lot of alcohol use. When I say alcohol use, I mean go hard or go home. All right. And so it was normalized. So the thing about it is, older men in the community, you would see them from early in the morning. They're going to the liquor store, or they're going to the bar because, liquor store, I don't know if we have, but where I was raised up, there are a lot of bars in the community, and there were guys who they would open those bars early in the morning for them, and those bars would close late at night. And so you saw men, some of your friends, and that's what they were doing, right? That's what the men were doing. I was fortunate enough to, I was raised in a home where my dad, he wasn't a hard drinker, all right, and he used to smoke and he used to drink, but then he changed, and so over time I was able to see two different views. I would be able to see my dad when he was at that place where he drank and he smoked a lot of cigarettes. I never saw him using marijuana, but then as his life changed and as I grew up and I became a teenager, and I went off to high school, and I went to university several years later. My exposure and experience at high school and in the community where I was raised, it was almost normalized. So drug use was normalized, alcohol use was normalized, not being in committed relationships was normalized. And so culturally, there I am in that context of living in that bubble of a cultural belief system. And so many of us as men, that's how we were raised. Now, let's take a little further. Let's say you're a guy who you played sports, or you were part of a sports team. Then guess what? You now start to reflect the culture of that team. One of my listeners say here, my dad never drank when I was born. He never since 2001, but my mom still drinks when I visit her. So that's another side of it. And thanks for the comment. So here is one of our live viewers here who's saying, "Hey, my dad never drink. Good for you. Good for you. Dad, kudos to you, dad. He never drank." But then on the other side, he's saying, "Hey, my mom did." Now, the nature nurture theory, as it relates to you and I, we become products of our environment. So seeing that, it's almost as if it is putting forth now an idea in your mind somehow that there needs to be some form of, how do you say it, there needs to be some form of drinking or smoking or something that's going on in the home, in the family, in the relationship. And here is the thing, guys, as kids, as we're growing up, our brain is still in the developmental stage. So why is it that as men we're impacted the way we are? Is because several times, and in the developmental stages of our lives, and let me shock you men, and you can go and do this research yourself, right? You can say, Rolando, why you're exposing us the way you are. But let me say this to you men, and this is a serious thing. Do you know that men's brain, the thinking, executive functioning portion of the brain of men, it is not fully developed until we're in our mid 20s or later? So when we are there, guys, and I'm talking to you now, men, when we are there, when we start getting involved in drug use or alcohol use, when we're teenagers, going over into our early 20s, when we drink a lot, when we smoke a lot of marijuana, when we get into harder drugs, cocaine and meth, and when we start to expose our brains to all of these hard drugs, when we abuse prescription medications and all that stuff, what we're basically doing, guys, is that we are harming ourselves more, because we are destroying brain cells, and we are also interrupting the developmental stage of the brain, because the brain is still in that space where it is developing. And when, as men, we are not challenging some of the cultural norms, then it becomes harder. Let me give you an example, guys. As a young man, I've had to learn how to move away from some of these cultural norms to find myself, right? I never found myself until years later, when I changed my life and changed my associations, and started to connect with, and hear different perspectives about healthier ways that I can live my life. So here's the reality, guys, that cultural norms, they do become some of the ways that we live our lives, because those cultural norms become the lens that we look at the world through. So those are some of the cultural norms that I've had to work through as a young man. Now for you, it's important sometimes for you to seek to examine, why am I doing things the way I'm doing it? Why am I looking at the world the way I'm looking at it? Why is it challenging for me to problem solve? Why am I not seeing myself as important and as valuable? Because sometimes, guys, cultural norms uh, puts us in that space as men where we say to ourselves, I'm not important, right? I don't have any value. My role is to provide. And you are correct. But you have to remember this is, as you're providing for your family and those that you love, who provides for you? You. So the idea is creating a balance where you understand that as I'm providing for my family in every way, not just financially, I need to also remember that there are certain things that as a man you need to pay attention to as it relates to your mental and physical wellness. All right. For example, guys, here's another cultural norm that sometimes as men we are not recognizing that we're doing. For example, how often do you go to the doctor to get a checkup? Right? That's something that a lot of us as men we don't do, because unless we're feeling extreme or severe pain, we don't attend to it. Why? Because the men who are around us, right, or fathers or coaches or mentors or older brothers, right, or siblings, it's almost as if we fear going to get any medical attention. So do you do your yearly checkup, man? Right? There are some cultural norms that has been handed down to us, and we live our lives through that lens more and more. Another huge cultural norm is that men don't cry. Have you guys ever heard that? Were you raised in that environment? And if you heard that, guys, you can just type in the chat, I can relate. Or you can say, hey, a thumbs up. I was taught that. So many of us as men were taught that. Men don't cry, right? Real men don't cry. So what happens to the men who actually cry? Aren't they real? Well, I want to tell you this, that the men who cry are far more real than those who don't. So hey, guys, if you're on here and you're saying, Rolando, I don't know what you're saying, what are you teaching here? I'm saying that more men have got to learn this reality, that you have got to give yourself permission to be human. That's your first responsibility, right? One of our viewers here says, men can't share our feelings to other men because they see us as weak. And I just feel sad seeing it. And I agree with you. It makes me sad too, viewer. Why? Because as a men's life coach, I've heard so many stories, and sometimes those emotional insecurities, they sink deep, right? Because as men, we are not in that space to really seek to facilitate conversations among ourselves as other men, to say, hey, man, you know what? It is okay, right? And so I want to reiterate this, guys, that men, you're out there and you've never allowed yourself to express any emotion. I'm saying the guys who have, they are the men who should be considered to be strong. Why? Because expressing emotion is not a weakness, it's a strength. Expressing emotions, guys, it's not a weakness, it's a strength. And if you are in a relationship, if you have a partner who make you feel weak or insignificant because you express emotions, then that relationship needs to be revisited, and you and your partner need to talk about how you can create a safe space for you as a man to feel okay to express emotions, because emotions are a part of you. Now, I spoke to women, and they say, hey, they are happy and they're proud when they see their man showing emotions, right? Guys, you cannot put yourself in that space or in relationships where you're afraid to show emotions. My listener says, hey, I'm 15, and thank you. I appreciate having, a teen on the live. He says, I'm 15 and I start to take care of my mental and physical health now, and I learn. Good for you. Now, let me tell you something. Let me say something to you, Veer. You know, one thing that we have learned here? We have learned that in 2025, between 2023 and onward, research came out that shows that younger men, men who are in their teens, late teens, early 20s, they are more open to paying attention to their mental health than the men who are in their mid to late 20s. Do you know what's happening, guys? A shift is going on. But the shift is taking place from our younger. So a lot of the men don't be looking at our younger guys and judging them, because we are the problem. We, guys like us, guys at our age, we are the problem. And the funny thing is there are so many of us out there who are not stepping up and being advocates for mental health. And we need more of us to be advocates for mental health, right? And you're doing it the right way, caller, viewer, because he says, hey, I do it slowly, like brick by brick. There's no greater way to do it, right? And the reality is that is how you experience self discovery. As you do it slowly, as you go on this journey of self discovery, and you do it brick by brick. Remember, guys, personal development is not an event, it's a lifestyle. So, doing it brick by brick is the most effective way to do it, because that way you can take the time to learn and to get to know yourself, right? And listen, guys, that's important, right? Getting to know yourself, learning more about yourself, challenging those cultural norms. Because, guys, sometimes some of these cultural norms, and I shared with you what some of my cultural norms were. Oftentimes, guys, those cultural norms are like cultural curses. And somebody may say, Rolando, why are you cursing culture? But let me tell you why I used that strong word as it relates to curse. Because, guys, some of us as men, it is because we refuse to let go of some of the cultural norms while we're hurting ourselves and hurting our relationships, right? And we have to go back and look at the things in culture that we're portraying in our relationships that's hurting our relationship. Men do it, women do it. But I'm speaking to the men right here, right now. And I'm saying to you guys, you have got to go and challenge some of those cultural norms, because some of those cultural norms are like cultural curses that's hurting our relationships. It's hurting the way we parent. It's hurting the way we conduct ourselves in our relationships. It's hurting our spiritual beliefs. It is hurting the way we relate, even in our relationships. And some of those cultural things that we do, guys, they are like cultural curses hanging over our heads. And it requires men who are bold and brave and willing to do something different. All right. One of our viewers said this, and thank you for sharing your thoughts here. It says, I'm from a small community and people are in gangs in here, and the elders speak about it. It hurts. And I know it has to hurt. I grew up in a small community as well. Okay, before I relocated here to Canada, I grew up in a small community. And listen, guys, I'm telling you this. There was a time in my life where, as a young man, I lost 14 of my closest friends to gang violence, right? Because that was that was the norm in that community, right? The only way that men knew how to problem solve was to go out in the street, right? And be aggressive and violent towards each other. And so many men that I grew up with, so many of my closest friends, lost them because that was a cultural norm. Gang violence, okay? Fighting amongst ourselves, bullying each other, calling each other names. And as I grew up, I realized that all that was just a facade that we as men, that was a facade that we were putting forth because we did not know any other way to problem solve. We didn't know how to sit as men and engage that emotional part of our brains to have healthy conversations so that we can grow. So, this is so powerful. This is so powerful. And thank you for sharing that comment because it's a real fact, guys. And I'm going to say this to the men who are in this space and even to the women who are in this space that culture, I'm not saying culture is a bad thing. I'm saying that there are some things in culture that is harming us. It's harming our relationships, right? And it's creating chaos, and it is hurting our children, it is hurting our women, it's hurting our moms, it's hurting the community. And as men, we have got to learn now how to find our way through some of these cultural norms, right? Because those cultural norms and expectations, they are hurting us. I see I have a viewer out there. Would you like to join our conversation? We're talking about cultural norms, and it's always great to hear, from you. What are some of the things that you have seen? What are some cultural norms that you have seen? For some of our female, viewers, you may be here. What have you noticed that culturally it's been hurting you and hurting your relationship? All right. It says it's hurting our future. The mothers drink during pregnancy, and it hurts me to hear. All right. And yes, you are correct. Right. And it's from moms who are using drugs and alcohol while we have kids who have FASD, that's fetal alcohol, syndrome, right? And so, yes, you're right. The cultural norms, and sometimes we surround ourselves with people who normalize some of these unhealthy behaviors. And I'm saying this to you, men, you have got to see it for what it is, and you have got to start making the effort to break these vicious cycles. Because, guys, it is when we break these vicious cycles where as men, we're going to learn now to have healthier mindsets. When we break these vicious cycles, we will the murder rate will go down, the violence and aggression will go down, the suicide rate will go down as we start challenging some of the cultural norms. And guys, I told you guys already, the XY Spark podcast is a podcast for men, and we're going to be talking about real issues that men face. And it is in talking about these real issues that we are going to get help. What is our quote for the day? Our quote for the day, guys, is this: knowing yourself is very important towards growing yourself. Okay? Knowing yourself is important towards growing yourself. If you don't know yourself, how are you going to grow? It is in knowing yourself that you're going to get to grow yourself. So as you go out there today, men, I want to challenge you. Get to know yourself, right? Ask questions. Revisit why you are functioning the way you are and start making those changes to transform your life, to become the best version of yourself. Knowing yourself is important in getting to grow yourself. This is your boy, your men's life coach, Rolando. Thank you once again for joining us on the XY Spark podcast, the podcast for men, where we seek to normalize conversations about men's mental health. we want to encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or even right here on TikTok. If you're live here on TikTok, please like, share, comment, and let us know how this live stream has helped to empower and motivate you as a man. We're also on the Podbean app. You can go back and listen to the full episode of our podcast as well on Spotify, on iTunes, on Amazon, on iHeart. The XY Spark podcast is there. Guys, go listening. And if you have a topic, a burning question, if you want to see more of what we do, you can also check out our website at xyspark.org. That's xyspark.org. You can grab yourself a merch and all that. Thank you for being here. It was great seeing you. Join us again tomorrow morning for another episode of the XY Spark podcast. Tomorrow it's Wednesday. We'll be here talking about Willpower Wednesday. What will be our topic? You have to be here to share in that conversation. In the meantime, you guys have a great day. And guess what? Right here at XY Spark, we just want to remind you that we believe that there is a spark in you. Thank you, and do have a great day until tomorrow morning.